They called Aurelian the restorer of the world, but why does almost no one talk about him today? Discover how this emperor saved the entire Rome with strategies that astonish even modern historians. The ancient city of Rome had already known its peak, but suddenly it was engulfed in despair. Economic crises, violent invasions, Roman wars on all sides, and unprecedented uncertainty turned what had been a glorious empire into fertile ground for chaos. In the midst of this turmoil, an unexpected figure emerged, destined to reverse what seemed irreversible. Many began to doubt Rome's ability to rise again. As epidemics swept through entire populations and political intrigues corroded internal unity, the heart of the empire beat weaker and weaker. But history has surprises in store, and a determined emperor proved that even when everything seems lost, there is room for reconstruction that restores a people's dignity. In the next few minutes, you will connect with a journey of overcoming and courage. It's about how the determination of a simple man left a remarkable legacy in just 5 years, rebuilding what many deemed irrecoverable. Despite barbarian invasions and internal divisions, the solution was crafted by someone who did not rest, until he saw his vision realized. Aurelian was born around AD 214 in a province that generates controversy to this day. Some historians point to Sirmium in Pannonia, while others advocate for Dacia Ripense as his birthplace. The uncertainty about this geographical detail only enhances the fascination with the man who, even starting from modest conditions, would become a protagonist in the history of Roman wars. Growing up in a rustic environment, surrounded by farms and a daily life of hard work, shaped his character. It is believed that his father was a veteran soldier and settler, a fact that early on exposed Aurelian to the reality of weapons and the constant need for defense of the empire's borders. His mother, identified by some as a priestess of the sun, cult may have directly influenced Aurelian's appreciation for the deity known as Sol Invictus. This religious fervor would later become a political tool, transforming the worship of the sun into a pillar of imperial power. Around AD 235, Aurelian officially joined the Roman army, emerging as a soldier of extraordinary efficiency. In a TE period marked by crisis and the threat of barbarian invasions, his talent for leadership and confronting adversities quickly gained fame in military camps. This fame, of course, did not arise from nowhere. The young soldier stood out in battles and training, demonstrating cunning in taking advantage of enemy gaps and securing crucial victories. Some said he seemed to know the enemy's plans even before they were executed. Such was his ability to anticipate movements. In addition to his military instinct, Aurelian showed administrative insight, realizing that a well-organized army would be crucial to maintaining Roman hegemony. Thus, he sought solutions to make life in the barracks more disciplined and efficient, without compromising respect for the soldiers. The emperor, who would emerge from these humble roots, was slowly preparing to face challenges that would make even the most experienced generals hesitate. Yet a spectacular turnaround awaited Aurelian, ready to place him in a position that few would imagine. Aurelian's career took a leap during Gallienus's campaigns against the hordes violating Rome's borders. With each victory against invaders from distant territories, his reputation as one of the best strategists of his generation grew. This prestige not only elevated his position in the army, but also drew the attention of powerful figures, such as Emperor Claudius II, nicknamed the Goth for his victory against the Goths. Under Claudius II's command, Aurelian led the Dalmatians, an elite force essential in countering threats like the Alemanni and the Goths themselves. His ability to coordinate pursuits, create bold ambushes, and divide enemy troops into multiple fronts secured surprising victories. While many officers were content to await the right moment to strike, Aurelian sought to take the initiative. His strategy often involved anticipating the movements of the barbarians, surprising them in terrain unfavorable to them. Quick siege tactics and intensive use of cavalry provided the Roman army with an advantage that sometimes decided entire battles in just a few hours. The death of Claudius II ushered in the period of uncertainty that always accompanied imperial succession during that turbulent time. Quintilis, Claudius's brother, briefly assumed power but lacked the unanimous support of the troops, as well as the political strength to consolidate his power. In this vacuum, Aurelian emerged as a natural choice to unify the legions and restore stability. It was in Sirmium, the same city that many point to as his birthplace, that Aurelian was proclaimed emperor by the troops. His men knew that this relentless and visionary military leader could ensure the safety of Rome, and the acclamation came almost as an inevitable recognition of his skills. The senatorial classes, often resistant to generals of humble origins, hesitated. However, the empire's crisis spoke louder. Without the support of a strong leader, Rome could fragment even further before the multiple battlefronts threatening its borders. Thus, the Senate ultimately yielded. This meteoric rise showed that Aurelian had more than just military competence. He possessed the ability to read the political landscape and use perfect timing to consolidate his power. Unification would not be a bed of roses, but for now the empire had found an emperor who did not shy away from confrontation, whether outside or within Rome. When Aurelian took the throne, the Roman Empire was fractured into three parts: the Roman core, the Palmyran Empire in the east, and the Gallic Empire in the west. Each of these factions acted almost autonomously, jeopardizing the unified identity of Rome. Beyond the danger of political disintegration, there was the constant pressure from barbarian invaders who exploited the gaps of a military structure weakened by the lack of central coordination. Peoples like the Vandals, Jutes, Sarmatians, and Alemanni pressed at the borders, creating an atmosphere of almost permanent tension. The side effects of this instability were devastating. Epidemics claimed the lives of thousands, while economic collapse left entire regions in misery. Currency was devalued, trade routes became dangerous, and confidence in imperial leadership dwindled with every defeat or plunder suffered. Aurelian, however, understood that in order to rebuild Rome, he would need not only to defeat external enemies, but also to restore internal faith in the empire. His first campaigns between 270 and 271 were decisive in containing the advances of various barbarian peoples, earning him the title of Germanicus Maximus for his victories against the Germans. The emperor employed a more offensive approach than his predecessors, launching swift strikes that surprised peoples accustomed to slowly infiltrating the borders. The result was a recapture of strategic territories, which brought some relief to Roman communities and signaled the strength of his leadership. Still, it was impossible to secure all points of the territory at once due to the multiple battlefronts. Aurelian delegated command to trusted generals and tried to manage each crisis with focus, setting priorities. It was necessary to deal with the most urgent threats without ignoring the gaps that could open elsewhere. This was a phase where any mistake could cost an important province or even the newly acquired prestige. But Aurelian proved to be tireless, uniting military discipline, belief in the divine power of Sol Invictus, and tactical organization. What followed would further reinforce this iron-willed determination. Among the battles fought against invaders, Aurelian also faced internal enemies. The most notorious case was the revolt led by Felicissimus, head of the imperial treasury. The tension arose from a series of monetary reforms that Aurelian attempted to implement to curb the rampant inflation and restore confidence in the Roman denarius. The rebellion came at a high cost to the empire. It is estimated that at least 7,000 people lost their lives in the clashes, both among military ranks and civilians caught in the crossfire. The internal chaos exposed the fragility of a state that was simultaneously trying to combat external threats and reorganize financially. Even in the face of such a deep blow to economic stability, the emperor did not back down. On the contrary, he tightened control over the treasury even more and maintained his plan to restore the value of coins. In his words, financial discipline was as vital as military discipline to ensure the survival of Rome. When rebels and opportunists tried to take advantage of the turmoil caused by Felicissimus's revolt, Aurelian once again demonstrated the same determination of his early years in the army. After an initial defeat in Placentia, he reorganized his forces and achieved 2 consecutive victories, in Fano and in Pavia. These battles temporarily restored order in northern Italy, providing crucial breathing room for imperial administration. Another significant legacy of this period was the famous Aurelian walls. The emperor ordered the construction of fortifications around Rome, realizing that the city was vulnerable to potential barbarian attacks. These walls not only protected the capital, but also symbolized the resurgence of Roman power under Aurelian's leadership. Many were surprised by the speed and grandeur of these works, which left an unmistakable architectural mark on the urban landscape. At the same time, they served as a constant reminder that the enemy threat was never far away. Rome would have to remain vigilant 24 hours a day. The rebellions and reforms left deep scars on Aurelian's trajectory, showing that it was not enough to be a great general. It was necessary to have political savvy and the courage to maintain strict measures even when they affected powerful interests. However, this process was far from over, as one of the greatest campaigns of his life was about to take shape. In the east, the figure of Zenobia, Queen of Palmyra, stood out for her audacity. Controlling essential trade routes in several eastern Roman provinces, she had practically established a parallel empire to Rome. Aurelian knew that to truly reunify the Roman world, he would have to confront this charismatic leader and her troops. In 272 AD, Aurelian set out on the campaign that would define the future of the region. His army advanced swiftly, recovering cities that had not even attempted to resist, perhaps fearing the emperor's reputation for being relentless. The Roman wars in this theater of operations were marked more by Aurelian's strategy than by bloody battles. As he approached the walls of Palmyra, he found a worthy adversary. Zenobia had established a sophisticated regime, supported by skilled generals and strong popular cohesion. Even so, the siege imposed by Aurelian's forces maintained constant pressure, cornering the queen and her defenses. The capture of Zenobia became legendary. She attempted to flee to seek support from the Sassanids, but was intercepted. With the surrender of the great sovereign of Palmyra, Aurelian showed his inclination towards clemency, preserving her life at first. However, the city still harbored the flame of revolt, which would erupt again in 273. In the second rebellion, Aurelian did not hesitate to exact exemplary punishment. Palmyra was looted, and its influence disappeared almost entirely. This extreme act demonstrated not only the military might of the emperor, but also his inflexibility toward regions that proved rebellious. Some believe that Aurelian's image as the restorer of the world gained strength from these events. For many, the fall of Palmyra symbolized the unification of Roman power and the end of one of the most sophisticated threats to imperial dominance. But others criticized the destruction of a renowned cultural hub, arguing that the violence could have been mitigated. Be that as it may, the fact is that by dominating Palmyra, Aurelian demonstrated his ability to stifle any separatist tendencies. However, another great challenge remained: the Gallic Empire. The lessons learned in the East were about to be put into practice in another part of the map. Tetricus, leader of the so-called Gallic Empire, had established a parallel administration in the region encompassing parts of Gaul, Britain, and Hispania. With his own government structure, he sought to keep these provinces away from direct Roman control. Aurelian, after restoring the East, now turned his attention to this western flank. In 274, Aurelian's army encountered Tetricus's. Many predicted a long and exhausting battle, but what happened surprised even the most experienced soldiers. Tetricus simply deserted and surrendered, avoiding a direct confrontation that could result in countless deaths. This gesture may have been motivated by Aurelian's reputation as an unyielding strategist, or the realization that resistance would be futile against someone who had reunified most of the empire in such a short time. Tetricus's surrender symbolized, in a way, the desire of many soldiers to return to normalcy under a centralized government. With the unification of the Gallic Empire, Rome regained important trade routes and strengthened its military presence in critical areas. It was a symbolic triumph, signaling that the fragmentation of the empire would no longer be tolerated. This victory also reignited Roman pride, bringing hopes that the worst of the crisis was behind them. Aurelian celebrated, His triumph in Rome with great pomp, Tetricus, Zenobia, and other defeated enemies were displayed in a procession, marking the return of glory to the Roman people. The festivities included games, celebrations, and speeches that consolidated Aurelian's image as the man who, in 5 years, had nearly rebuilt the entire structure of the empire. Even so, the emperor did not let vanity take hold. He knew that the stability achieved was fragile, and any failure in administering the reconquered territories could reignite old conflicts. A testament to this would be his next military initiative against the Sassanids, another latent threat to Roman borders. With each step, Aurelian's figure grew in popularity but also in responsibility. With the empire reunified, new demands emerged to ensure security and prosperity. Meanwhile, a tragic event was looming, poised to change the course of his story. Aurelian planned a major offensive against the Sassanids. His goal was to firmly consolidate the eastern border and ensure that no kingdom would dare challenge Roman supremacy again. However, an unexpected episode abruptly interrupted his advance. His own officers assassinated him in 275 AD. The plot stemmed from a forged document by Hieros, Aurelian's secretary. In the text, the emperor was allegedly planning to severely punish members of the Praetorian Guard. Fearing for their lives, the officers decided to act before becoming victims of an imaginary purge. The emperor's death was a shock to Rome, and a demonstration of how volatile internal politics remained. Without Aurelian's firm hand, the empire fell back into episodes of instability. There are speculations that his wife, Ulpia Severina, may have exercised a brief interim government, but nothing is definitively proven. The fact is that the loss of the one who had reunified the territory came at a high cost to the credibility of the central power. Even in the face of a tragic end, Aurelian received posthumous honors. He was recognized as Divus Aurelianus, which represented a form of deification of the deceased emperor. This title reinforced the vision that he had been a restorer, someone who in a short time managed to do what many considered impossible. His support for the cult of Sol Invictus also influenced subsequent generations, establishing religious foundations that would endure in the Roman environment. Although he was not the first to exalt this deity, Aurelian intensified its veneration, making it almost a state religion with great popular appeal. His premature death left gaps that his successors could not fill with the same efficiency. Structural problems such as succession and army organization would continue to plague Rome, proving that Aurelian's achievements, though grand, needed continuity to fully bear fruit. When thinking of the crisis of the 3rd century, it is impossible not to associate it with Aurelian's name. He was a turning point, both in the military and the administrative fields. But the legacy of the emperor who saved Rome from ruin in just 5 years would always be marked by an abrupt ending that prevented the total consolidation of his project. Aurelian's life shows how a man of humble origins but giant ambition can shape the destiny of an empire in ruins. In just 5 years, he achieved the unimaginable. He reunified the 3 parts of Rome, faced barbarian invasions, recaptured important cities, and left lessons of discipline and courage that echo through the centuries. Although his end was tragic, his legacy remains alive in the collective memory of Rome and in those who study the sagas of the Roman wars. It is impossible not to wonder how the Roman Empire would have been if he had lived longer. Would everything have been different? This remains a thought for you who followed this journey. Now it's your turn to evaluate. What surprises you the most about Aurelian? And how far can the determination of one person go when they are willing to face gigantic challenges? Share your opinion and, of course, don't forget to participate in the comments.